Now it's time for perspective. Going to start with a question that you probably thought you would never hear on France 24. If you think of sheep, what do you think of? Cute, maybe, also perhaps stupid, noisy, cowardly. We even use, of course, the expression lambs to the slaughter. But is that really fair? Well, to discuss our mistreatment of the beloved animal and some of the other major farming and environmental issues of the day, I'm joined today by a man who's been described as Britain's finest living nature writer, John Lewis-Stempel. He's author of The Sheep's Tale, the story of our most misunderstood farmyard animal. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme today. So do you think obviously you do from the title of the book, do you think we're getting sheep all wrong then?
Good morning. We are getting sheep entirely wrong. Far from being dumb and cowardly, they're actually intelligent. They can be brave. To us, all sheep may look the same, but in fact, a flock of sheep is a very complex society based on hierarchy, kinship. But also, for instance, 8% of rams are gay. They are a proper society sheep. But I think our treatment of them is alarming to the extent we're now putting them into factories. About 10 million sheep worldwide are now in factory farming systems. But sheep are also under quite a sustained political and cultural attack. For instance, vegans and vegetarians blame them for causing climate change because their burps are composed of methane. And then, we have rewilders who don't like sheep because sheep eat the trees that might otherwise forest our uplands.
Is that fair or is that not fair, do you think, then?
Well, actually, I think the thing is, you see, that trees aren't the only good habitat. Grassland could be a fantastic habitat, and sheep farmed sustainably actually promoters of biodiversity. I mean, in terms of floral diversity, wildflowers in meadows. But never underestimate what comes out of the back end of a sheep either. An organic sheep, its manure is going to feed in the region of 250,000 insects per year. That's the beginning of a food chain in nature that goes, all the way up to swallows and foxes.
You talk about the food chain. I mean, presumably, as you say, it really does depend on the animal. We talk about what comes out the back of a sheep. Obviously, what comes out the back of a cow in different ways can be good or bad. I mean, presumably it's all part of that whole mix of different animals and structures that you need to create and keep the countryside going.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, one of the biggest problems that actually faces us, apart from climate change, is soil erosion. I mean, across Europe, we're losing about, 3 tons per hectare of topsoil. In industrialized agriculture, that's probably 10 times that amount is actually lost. We're actually going to die of hunger, to be honest, before we drown in the rising sea. And if we don't use artificial fertilizer, which is nitrate, which is actually, pretty harmful all around the environment, whether it's to the soil or indeed to the sky, how do you fertilize the soil? Well, actually, a sheep is also a walking muck spreader.
Nicely put, nicely put. Are we getting it right generally with farming? I mean, there's a lot of criticism, isn't there, against farmers, for example, pesticides is the obvious one. But, and they're trying to run a business. Let's not forget that, of course. But for the environment, which, of course, is really becoming a central argument at the moment. We just had Emmanuel Macron re-elected here in France, and one of the first things he talked about was the environment. Are we getting farming right as far as the environment's concerned?
No, we're getting farming entirely wrong. I mean, it's a kind of complete myth that large-scale industrialized farming, produces good quality food, for instance. I would say it's the opposite case. I mean, anyone who's got a potager or a kitchen garden knows, the more you tend and love your land, the better your produce will be. And indeed, you'll probably get more quantity of it as well. I sincerely believe that we do need to move to sustainable organic farming generally, for the birds, for the bees. I mean, we massacre our bees with pesticides and they are our pollinators. We have a terrible habit, humans, of killing ourselves, but I don't want to be too pessimistic either because, humans can do great things in nature. I mean, most of the ponds in, the countryside of England, Wales, and indeed France are actually aren't natural. I mean, they're actually created by humans, in farming systems. And, there aren't many better things, in terms of habitat than the ponds, and humans create them. We can get things right. But
How
we
do we
really
do
do
that, though? I mean, there are billions of people, aren't there, now on the planet, and we've got to feed them all. How on earth do we get the balance right between the two halves?
Well, I mean, as I say, I believe it's a myth that chemicalized, industrialized agriculture, it is the only solution. I don't think anybody really thinks that. The World Health Organization doesn't think that. It thinks our chemical use in farming is actually probably more likely to kill us in the long run. Because if you look at what's happening in factory farming, for instance, I mean, factory farming, can be an absolutely breeding ground of the kind of viruses that we see escaping, such as avian flu. And those transmit over to humans. We have to be very, very careful with our farming systems.
And is it possible to get farmers to be on board and just do all those things themselves? Or is it really, do you think, up to governments and legislation to enforce things?
Well, I mean, I think it's a question of both, really, isn't it? I mean, I really don't personally know many farmers who want to carry on the way we are, because one of the things about industrialized agriculture is if you ever participated in this, you find you're working very hard, exploiting yourself, you're exploiting the land, you're exploiting pretty much everything going. And I think everybody wants to kind of get off that system now. It's going to need help from government. And, and one of the things I admire in France, by the way, I spent part of my year in France, is the way that French government and councils use the power of procurement. I mean, to organise, for instance, organic food for children's meals. There's a lot of things, governments can do.
Just going back to what you talked about at the beginning, we've just got time to talk about something else that I picked out from your book. You have a very personal connection, if you like, don't you, to your flock? I mean, we meet some interesting characters, Action Ram and the very sweet maid Marion as well.
I like to have a very close relationship with all my animals. I like to give them names. One of the great things about livestock is it can be incredibly, companionable. They are very good company, because they are indeed intelligent. They're good company, and at the moment in France, I have Wesson sheep, which are the smallest naturally occurring breed of sheep in the world, and they're knee high. And one of the things I like about them is they're incredibly easy to shear, because I can just pop them on my lap and shear them, rather than doing the usual back-breaking thing one has to do when he's shearing sheep.
Very, very practical. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme today. Good to talk to you. That's John Lewis-Stempel. He's author of the book, The Sheep's Tale, the story of our most misunderstood farmyard animal. Good to broaden the subject out there as well and talk about the environment and farming as well. Thanks very much.